Welcome to the ninth grade experience. I'm your host, Chris Dutchko. As a teacher of freshmen and one of our freshman mentor committee faculty advisors, I spend a lot of my school day thinking about and helping students with the successful transition from middle school to the halls of Emmaus High School. The goal of this podcast is to give you the story of the ninth grade here at Emmaus High School through the people who live it daily, the students and staff. We will attempt to touch on the real issues and stories that ninth grade students face, ranging from academics to athletics, technical school, and just trying to find your way as one person in a community of approximately 2,700 students. We will also look to speak with some of the influential staff members who play a key part in a student's ninth grade year. It is the hope that future ninth grade students and their families can use the tips and insights provided here to begin making connections to their potential new school and learn more about the day-to-day lives of the students that they will one day become and realize from day one that ninth grade counts. You can learn more about this episode and all of the episodes of the ninth grade experience by following us on Twitter at EHSFMC or at Chris Stutchko, or following the hashtag EHS9counts, or our website, sites.google.com/eastpennsd.org/ninth grade experience. Before we jump into today's topic, let's thank our sponsor for this show, the East Penn Education Foundation. This podcast has been made possible through a $1,000 grant awarded to teachers like me each year who are attempting to do unique projects in the area of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. The foundation supports programs that put learning in motion by giving students the tools they need to think actively in a complex and changing world. You can follow them on Facebook at EPSD Education Foundation, on Twitter at EPSD EdFound, or on Instagram at EPSD Ed Foundation. Now on to the show. On the first Monday of every month, the faculty and staff at Emmaus High School trade their normal clothing for the opportunity to wear gear in a visual and symbolic support of No Place for Hate, an organization that allows students to facilitate diversity awareness and devise anti-bullying projects that affect the entire student body. As part of their ongoing mission to bring unique speakers and topics to students' attention, the club welcomed Dr. Mykee Fowlin to EHS on Wednesday, September 25th to perform his one-man show, I Am Not the Enemy. Dr. Mykee mixes psychology, performance, and poetry to, in his own words, create an atmosphere of worldwide inclusion, not just tolerance, towards all people. This year's performance was a follow-up to You Don't Know Me Until You Know Me, which was held during the 2018-2019 school year. In this episode, Dr. Mykee is joined by No Place for Hate co-advisors Steph Larkin and Brian Harkness, as well as several members of the club for a follow-up conversation that occurred immediately after his production. The panel talks about some of the best ways to find your voice in order to tell your story, what to do in the face of adversity, and some suggestions on what a student should do if they identify with one of the characters in Dr. Mykee's show. So let's take some time to celebrate our differences and accept our shared experiences in this wide-ranging chat with Dr. Mykee and No Place for Hate. All right, so we're here for a special live edition of the Ninth Grade Experience podcast following Dr. Mykee's great talk here at Emmaus High School. So we're just going to take some time here to introduce everyone that's up here. We have a couple of people here ready to kind of talk about what you just heard and to give a little bit of input about what our No Place for Hate Club is here at Emmaus High School. So I'm just going to ask the people down the road to introduce themselves.
I'm Mr. Brian W. Harkness. I'm a chemistry teacher here.
And I am Mykee Fowlin, and I am a performer. I'm also a poet and also a creative force.
And we have somebody else. Are you?
I'm joining us. This is Mrs. Larkin. I've been the advisor of No Place for Hate for 13 years, and I'm an English teacher here at the high school.
So this is the second year that Dr. Mykee has been here. Last year, he had a performance that was I Am Not the Enemy. or no, last year his performance was "You Don't Know Me Until You Know Me," and this year was the follow-up to that, "I'm Not the Enemy." So we're going to get into talking about the performance that if you were in the building today you heard, or kind of getting a little bit information about. But this is for all the people up here in the front, and you do not have to mention the year that this happened, but we always like to start every episode with asking, what was your ninth grade experience like? So anybody that's on the panel here can tell us about what their ninth grade year was like. And again, no years unless you want to call yourself out for how old you are.
I think, for me, that question, I end up thinking about a lot of different experiences in my ninth grade year. I think one of them is just how I felt lost in a lot of ways. I think middle school was a hard part for me, but then the transition from middle school to high school, that ninth grade, I think I wasn't authentic in just understanding myself at that part. And I think the experiences that in ninth grade were really awakening to me. I think one of the ones that jump out to me is my first kiss happened in ninth grade. It was after a football game, or during a football game, and I really liked this girl. I won't mention her name, but I really liked her, and I went to a school, it's mostly white students in the school, and my buddy Sean, I said, "Sean, I really want to kiss this girl. I really want to kiss her." And he's like, "Okay, I'll go over and I'll set it up for you, but you gotta hook me up with your friend, this other girl." And I said, "Oh, no problem, I'll do that." My friend was like, "Absolutely, Sean is hot." And so I was like, okay, that was easy. So then Sean comes back, and I was expecting a giant no from this girl, and then Sean said, "Yeah," she said yes. And I said, "Really?" I just couldn't believe it. I was like, "Are you kidding? Are you joking?" He's like, "No, she really said yes." And I said, "Well, what did she say?" He's like, "Well, she was a little bit concerned because you're black. And I told her, don't worry, you'll be able to kiss as good as a white guy." And that is what I remember about the kiss, right? That somehow that I had to, whatever that meant, adjust who I was so I could fit into that environment. And that story was what the symbolic for my experience in a lot of ways in Toms River, just growing up in a town where I knew how to adapt, but then I always wondered, who's the real me? I think that part was always something that played a role in my life.
Anybody else up here want to share their ninth grade story?
I think overall for me, ninth grade was kind of a transitional year of me trying to really find where I fit in, like so many other students. And I just kind of always felt like an outcast. When I was younger, I did traditional things like cheerleading and dance and things that little girls do. But then when I started to look a little different, dress different, I like to wear combat boots, and I started shaving sides of my head and dyeing it blue. They kicked me off the cheerleading squad because I didn't look preppy. I didn't look like the other girls. And so I think that made me kind of angry. And then I sort of, went to some extremes like some kids do. I'm going to be completely punk rock and I'll show you. So it was just kind of trying to find my people, so to speak, the place where I belong, the friends that I made that then really stuck by me. So it was bittersweet year for me.
And Mr. Harkness?
Oh, I don't want to share. That's not true.
Wait, I've known you for a lot of years, and this would be the first time that you've ever said, "I don't want to
I
share."
just wanted to be modest. I remember I went north central Pennsylvania, and I remember that our ninth grade was moved to the senior high. We were part of a junior high, so I missed being a ninth grader in a junior high, and we were not wanted at the senior high by the upperclassmen, by the sophomores, by the juniors, by the seniors, and by the teachers. And my experience was pretty much wanting to fly underneath the radar because you are the smallest people in the school. And there was this not wanting us. I do remember that. And I have this voice, except it was higher. So, that was an additional challenge. It wasn't horrible. It just was like, I just remember even my history teacher saying at the time, "I don't like ninth graders. We don't want you here." And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And he meant it. And so, but, what doesn't kill you does sometimes make you stronger or just want to run and hide. But anyway, I'm still here.
So we'll ask a question of Dr. Mykee here first. So at the beginning of your presentation today, about like 5 minutes in or so, there was a story about an Italian freshman who was part of the football team and kind of had some negative experiences. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about that? And a question that I got from the group that I was with was, sometimes where does the inspiration for a story like that come from? So can you just share a quick version of that story that you shared about the freshmen on the football team? Because I think it might be a story that some of the freshmen listening to, or even the students that are here, could identify with.
Yeah, so I think part of that inspiration came by a situation that happened when I was in high school, and he wasn't a freshman at the time, but he had the experience of what freshmen often have, in that he was the new kid in the school. And even though he was a big, imposing figure, that he was taken advantage by other students in the school. So I remember one time walking into the football locker room and seeing 4 seniors had strapped this guy down on the bench, and they were wrapping his body in black electrical tape. But then they took a jar of Bengay, and they started taking clumps of the icy hot Bengay and sticking it into every orifice that possible of this guy. And I walked in when this part was interchange was happening, and I remember being horrified. And I remember being angered as if it was happening to me, and I started pushing away the guys that were doing it. And my poor friend had no clue of who was on his side in that moment, so he just started swinging it at everyone, including me. But I just thought to myself in that moment, how do we make someone feel less human? We do it by making them feel less human, by doing things like that.
And that's the experience that you talked about there. It's kind of woven through several of the other different stories that you tell, and they're all interconnected in a way. So it kind of seems like one of those things where, like, the things that happen to maybe somebody as a freshman, they kind of stick with everybody for a long time. It's not something that's easily forgotten or easily pushed to the side.
Absolutely. So part of the show I did today, I Am Not the Enemy, is the interconnectedness of our experiences, whether that be interpersonal or intrapersonal experiences that we have. That there are things that happened in my freshman year of high school that still make me feel awkward when I walk into a room and people are looking at me and they snicker. I'm on stage all the time, but if I get on stage and I'm in front of an audience that's snickering before I speak, there's just this little 14-year-old boy that's like, should I run off? Should I do something crazy? Should I do something really weird right now? Because that's what I would have done when I was in my freshman year. And that will always, I think it's always still flows through me in a way. Doesn't matter how old I get, that those experiences still are a part of me.
So just as a quick show of hands, we have some of our No Place for Hate students and club advisors in the room. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you had an experience your freshman year that you can kind of still remember that kind of sticks with you in that way? So obviously you can't see this, but about half of the hands went up. So it's really interesting that even here at Emmaus High School, we still have students that will go and have those experiences too. So this is for Mrs. Larkin and Mr. Harkness. So as advisors of No Place for Hate, how do you see a lot of freshmen come in to join the club, and what kind of advancements or evolution of them do you see as they kind of go from being part of it as a freshman and then joining and then going through through their high school career? Do they come because something like that might have happened to them, or do you just kind of see them wanting to be a positive change in the building?
I think for freshmen, we're still trying to actively figure out how to actively involve them before they come up to the high school. So like this year, I teach 2 sections of 9th grade, so I just grabbed students that I thought would be leaders in some way. And you're all different in personality, and I think that's important to have different kinds of students join. So I more or less said, okay, this kid seems a little bit more comfortable, or this kid has this kind of quality. And all our kids do. You're just the ones that I see. And we needed 9th graders, because usually what happens is we get kids by like sophomore, junior year, we keep you for 2 years, and so we don't really get as much of an opportunity to see as much growth, because by the time a kid is at the high school for, by junior year, there's not a huge change between junior and senior year. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add that we are, just to echo Mr. Harkness, we're always looking for freshmen to sort of join our club. We are having a new member meeting tomorrow, which will be a great opportunity for kids to come and check us out. But, freshmen sometimes join us, like our president this year, Dominic Santoro. He was very active in the middle school with bullying prevention and creating, surveys for the school and so on and so forth. So we see that passion sometimes right away coming in freshmen and that commitment. And we just want to see more of it. So come our way, please.
And you said that you've been an advisor for 13 years of No Place for Hate.
13.
What has been the change, or have you seen a dramatic change in not just freshmen, but in all students here at Emmaus High School? Like what, I don't know if people understand that it's been in existence for that long. So what have you seen in the building, and what have you seen even from just students in general? Like, have you seen an increase in tolerance? Have you seen an increase in awareness of the differences in people over those 13 years?
Well, I can tell you that I'm not in the trenches every day of the cafeteria and the hallways like the students are, so I can really only go by what the students report back to us. But I've seen, we just have so much more support with the immediate students in the club, just the numbers growing as well as sort of visibility in the school. I think that we've established ourselves enough now that when I say, hey, Dr. Mykee's coming, I don't have to explain who that is. They know right away, and they're excited and enthusiastic. So it's gotten a little bit of a cachet, I think, that it didn't have before. But in terms of, the climate of the school, yes, I think it's improving from what I hear back from the students. There are less instances of outright, like overt bullying or racism on a daily basis. But honestly, I feel that ebbs and flows and kind of mirrors what's happening in our community. So we just have to stay vigilant and a positive role model and message for the school so that when those tough times happen, we're a place of solace for the students that need it.
And Dr. Mykee has the opportunity to go to schools all around the United States. Is that?
Yes.
So do you see anything in particular, like when you go school to school, now you're only there for a couple hours at a time sometimes. You've been here at Emmaus High School a little bit, but are you noticing anything in your tours around? Like, have you seen a progression in inclusion and tolerance and some of the things that you're really trying to bring home in your messages during your presentation?
It's funny. It's definitely school based. There are some schools, like when I come here, I think in some ways, students here, because of like a group like No Place for Hate, and just the atmosphere in the school. Like even when I did my character, who's talking at the end, when he's talking about his best friend Bill, saying to him, "I think I'm gay." Well, there's not an audible reaction in this school. People aren't freaked out by this, wow, this person had a friend who was gay. But I go to other schools, and schools not too far from here, that will be like, whoa, no, and then there'll be just this burst of things, or I've been to certain schools where if I'm doing my football player who's gay in my other show, that I one time had a student literally stand up and shout out, "You derogatory of gay people, F word," right? So it's like, I'm like, wow, this is wild. So I think it just depends on the school, what's in the school, what is acceptable, what things to do, versus what is not acceptable. But this school is a place that I've been coming back here for a number of years, is a place with the student body that I've always felt accepted and great interactions with the students.
And your background, you have a psychology background, you have a poetry writing background and performance. So how did you kind of decide that you were going to take all of those skills and blend them into the shows that you kind of take around the country and perform for students? Because you perform for students in elementary levels, you have the high school more high school themed shows, you're at conferences all around the country. So you kind of have a wide range of what you're presenting. So how did you kind of decide that was the direction that you wanted to go?
The gift of ADD. that is, I mean, genuinely, like I cannot focus my energy into just one area, and I think that has always been. I didn't realize the gift of having, in a lot of ways, and I say it somewhat humorously, but there is this other part of learning that just because you have depression or just because you have ADD, it doesn't mean the only thing you have to focus on is the part of how do you limit that. It's also where does it allow you to expand. And so my depression has been one of my chief operators in my creativity. My ADD gives me the gift to never write down a script, but to be able to improvise on a stage in front of an audience for an hour and 15 minutes and not worry if I want to go to another track or go off the road and come back onto the road that I thought I was heading down first. That's part of it. And as a kid, I just said that anything that I do well, because there's some things I just didn't do well, so I didn't even try to do them. But anything I do well, I love to do. Which is that's. I was talking to Mr. Harkness about this. I don't know the experience of just doing something well that I don't like. And we're talking about with science, and you're really good at chemistry, but it's not your passion. So
No,
it's like
working with kids is my
right.
passion.
Working with kids is passion. So I never experienced having that thing that I can do very well, but I don't really feel is my passion.
And that's a great message for the ninth graders or parents or anyone that's listening, like trying to find that passion. Because in a lot of our episodes, we talk about ninth grade students trying to find their way and what are they going to get involved with and clubs and organizations to join. And we'll give the No Place for Hate a little bit more information at the end. But just it's really interesting where you can find that skill or that thing that kind of lights you on fire, not literally, but gets you really excited about stuff, and then you can make a career out of it.
Yeah.
So you do have to touch on a lot of interesting topics during your presentation. Just to list a few, it was drugs, alcohol, decision-making, regret, thoughts about suicide, dealing with death, PTSD, wealth, and sexual identity. A lot of heavy topics there. And this is for everybody up on the panel here. Do you ever worry, like, going into a high school that, like, maybe it's too heavy, maybe it's too much? And then for Mr. Harkness and Mrs. Larkin, do you ever worry about like some of the pushback or blowback from people about like, oh, well, did the students really need to kind of hear that kind of stuff in the middle of their school day? So you can kind of take that in any order you guys would like.
I think for me as the performance artist, I think there's an internal boundary that I'm pretty aware of. Not that it's the same that a given school will have, because I've definitely had pushbacks from certain schools throughout the tenure of doing my presentations. I just hope that in the end, my overall messages get seen and understood in a way that's more clear than just like, wow, this made me feel uncomfortable. And for some schools, it's harder to deal with discomfort. I remember one school in Arkansas, and the principal wanted me not to do my football player who was gay because he said we can't talk about that in this area. We don't want parents to think that we're recruiting children to be gay, and I didn't know what that meant. And and then he said, so can you come up with something else? And I was just like, sarcastically, I was like, what do you want me to talk about, leprosy? And he was like, yes, leprosy. And so I was like, wow, And so there's a part of me that I think that I trust that what I'm doing is for the greater good, even though there'll be resistance. And I feel like when there is resistance, it's not about me. And I think that's one of the things I've tried to hold on to. But with this other point is that I've had people say, when you do this, it's a little bit insensitive, and I'll consider these things. And there have been times where I've changed certain things I say in characters because I've reflected and been like, I'm so glad that student or that adult said that to me, because that can come off a little bit in a way that's not what I want.
And then how about for our advisors? Do you ever worry about the pushback or the blowback from people, or kind of not finding the value in an assembly like this?
I used to, but experience has shown me that the administrators and the community are so supportive. I know that I never have to worry about that. I try not to hear negative feedback if there is any, because I don't want to be discouraged. I know that these assemblies are so helpful to students, especially when, usually you have these tearful, just exposed kids at the end that are willing to share and get support and maybe talk about or look at something that they haven't had the courage to do before. So I've seen the positive effects that it's had on students, even if it might be a little uncomfortable. And honestly, the feedback from parents and community and students has been overwhelmingly positive year after year.
And I also think it's right to be real. A lot of our students walk around with all the issues that you talk about. There's a kid in our building somewhere, if not more than one. And I think we do a disservice when we're dishonest with our students about what they may be struggling with. And, if a student hears that somebody identifies with their struggle, whatever it is, it really can make a big difference for them. And I think it's very important not to sugarcoat issues, because then it's not real. And I think it's very important to be real.
So we have one more question before we'll turn it over to any student questions in the room. So I'm just giving everyone that's here an opportunity to kind of move themselves toward the front if they'd like to ask a question. If you don't, that's okay too. But I do need to know, did you cure leprosy in Arkansas?
I try. So I'll tell you actually how I handled that. I mean, so when he actually said that, I was just dumbfounded. But then he says, if you dare do that character, I will stop you in the middle of your show. And so I was in a real tricky, because I don't like to compromise the integrity of what I do when I'm presenting, because then I'm like, well, then any character should be cut out of this if that's the point. So when I got to that character, though, I just stood with the jersey that I had at the time, and for about 5 minutes of silence, I stood just holding the jersey and just saying, this is what I'm not allowed to do, this character, but this is the silence and how this character has been silenced for issues that make people uncomfortable. And he didn't like that either. But he didn't stop me during the show, but he certainly had some choice words to pass on to the people who brought me in.
So last question, and this can go for everybody too. So what advice would you have for a student here at Emmaus High School that is like one of the characters that are in your performance? What would you kind of advise them to do, tell them to do? You just told the story of how you approached somebody that was kind of trying to shut down your individual expression and kind of telling your story. But what would you, and this is for everybody, what would you advise, or how would you tell students to kind of tell their own story? Because you said at several points, you said all of us have stories, and I think that's important to kind of tell. So what would you suggest if you're feeling like one of those kids in the stories?
Sometimes it's not necessarily in screaming it from a mountaintop or forcing it onto other people. That sometimes, but to tell your story, it may come into a way of when you're writing an essay in a classroom, or I leave postcards and books in Barnes and Noble, just with encouraging words, or even times when I'm feeling down. But getting it out is the most important part. How do you get it out, and who you trust with getting it out? And some of us have friends that aren't the safest people with our stories. And so knowing which friends that you can really open up and show more of your true authentic self is also an important skill to have. It may not be your best friend. And it may not be your friend. It may be a teacher, an administrator, a youth pastor for me, one of the people in my life. And I just say that you have to get it out, though, or that part just will start eating away.
Any other suggestions from up in the front here?
I would totally agree with that, and also just to find some place or some way to be connected with others, because if you isolate yourself, it's not going to change.
I'd say just kind of on that, also be careful what you do on social media, because you may be actually needing some help and you put it out there and you may get some negative feedback because people just don't understand the story when they see it. So, if you do reach out, make sure it's a person, somebody that you know and trust, because once it's out there, it's kind of hard to bring that back.
Awesome. So is there anyone in the room that has a question? They want to come up and ask anything or shout it from the back? Yeah. You can
Just coming up.
You can come on up. This isn't, just so you know, you're not going to win anything in the Showcase Showdown for running up, though.
I just wanted to know, what was one of your favorite reactions, or what reaction to something that you did stuck out most in your mind?
I don't know if I have just one, but that's a great question. But I definitely reflect on that quite a bit. There have been so many throughout. One that, and this is one thing that I'll pass on to people, like if you can, when you have an experience, and I know you think you will remember it because it was so impactful, I'm going to show you one of the most impactful stories that I did not remember until I started going through essays that I've written for over the years. And this happened about 8 years ago at a high school. This boy came up and he started talking to me. And he talked to me for about an hour and 15 minutes. And I was standing there just listening to him. I didn't really say very much through the hour and 15 minutes. But at the end, I just remember him giving this deep breath and just going, I feel better now. You know, you're the first person who's ever talked to me and who just listened to me. And then he says, but I got something for you. And he runs out of the auditorium. He comes back in a couple minutes later with this sort of rolled up poster-sized paper. And he goes, I want you to open this. And I open it. And it looked like a mechanical drawing class that he must have done, but he's like, no, that's my school floor plan. You see where the X's are? That's where I was going to place the bombs tomorrow. But I'm not going to place those bombs tomorrow because you just sat here and you listened to me. Now, that's an impactful story. It's a powerful story. I had forgotten that story until I was rereading and I thankfully had written an essay about it, you know? And so I've learned that sometimes our stories that we have and that are really impactful, just jot it down. Put it in notes on your phone, whatever it may be, because our memories will have so many more experiences. We'll just push down certain things that that aren't in the forefront.
So when you're doing these shows, is there like a character that you relate to the most out of all of them, or is there like one of your favorites?
Yeah. You know, so this one that I did today, I Am Not the Enemy, I think I really enjoy, it's a hard word to say, but I really kind of, I like playing around the last character when I'm doing Steve and the Steve and Bill story, partly because I went to high school with both of those guys, but the other part is in sharing something tragic or heavy, how do we find humor in it as well, you know? And so there's these parts where he's just like, oh, you know, like, you know, what do you mean you're gay? You know, dude, I know everything you've done with every girl. I have the video to prove it, you know? And or just being like, well, you know, were you checking me out, you know? And like, oh, what do you mean you're not attracted to me? And I think finding those moments of humor in a heavy subject is something that I love to do.
Couple more questions from over here.
So when you're presenting to an audience and you start crying during your presentation, how do you handle that? Because some of the topics you handle can also touch like students. Do you see them crying too? How do you handle like all those emotions?
Yeah, so I try to stay in the moment. That's a great question. The Bill and Steve part, like it's not hard to be in that place where I feel every time I think that I wish I was closer to Bill so that he didn't feel so alone. I wish I was in his circle of friends. But he was just a guy that we were friendly in high school, but it wasn't like we were in our same friend group. But that one for me is always emotional, and I hope that people are feeling, because I think that's where change happens, when people can say, wow, this mattered to me, seeing that.
I also have one more question. When you're in the moment, you know, performing, do you ever feel like you're part of all your characters that you present? Do you ever feel like you put some of you in them?
Always, yes, always. Thank you for asking that. Yes, I feel like the way that I can make it most authentic is when I can find whatever link it is in that character that also has a link to my own experiences or my own life. So yeah, I look for that actually. So even some of the characters I've created in the past that have been really nasty human beings in some ways. I've had characters like that I still try to say, what do I have similar to this person? Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was wondering what advice you would give to someone who would want to talk about their struggles but doesn't necessarily feel safe or doesn't want someone to like view them differently.
Oh, yeah. Figuring out how to talk about our stories is a process, you know. I think so. My show that I did last year, I talked about not in a character, but my own experience of having been molested and being 11 and 12, and the kid was 16 and 17, and he was my friend. That took me about, I don't know, the better part of 10 years or so to really even bring that up in my presentations. And all of those feelings of vulnerability were something I had to experience. So I think one of the things to start to become comfortable with is your own vulnerability in it before really sharing it. So I've learned to write out a lot of my, like, poetry. I wrote a lot of poetry, and I talked to certain people in my friend group about some of those painful things, so that eventually when I started sharing it, though it was awkward and uncomfortable, I owned my story. Like, the power when you own your story is something that no one can, they can't take advantage of your story in the same way. And so I've learned to figure out how to find those people that I can share my story that won't have judgment. And you know them instinctively. You see the way they handle other stories, and I think that's what you have to trust.
Thank you.
When someone cried at your performance, do you ever get to talk to them about how you related to it or how they related to you?
Yes. So I do. I'm fortunate to be able to hear thousands of stories now of people that have been really deeply affected emotionally by my presentations. And I shared this, I don't know, what grade are you in right now?
11th.
You're 11th, yeah. So last year when I was talking about doing my presentation, and when I was talking about my presentation of being molested, and then, you know, saying I wanted to give up on life that afternoon, that this girl in a middle school, when she came up to me and she just hugged me and she's crying and she just said, you know, thank you for not killing yourself in college, because today you just saved my life. And what I couldn't see are the pieces of the puzzle of this giant whatever design it's making. We can only see where we are in the puzzle of design in that moment. And so part of the sharing of somebody sharing their story of how I've impacted their lives makes me realize that all that stuff I've been through, I don't need to feel sorry about it, because it's been used now for helping other people as well.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, one more. And then we'll ask either Mrs. Larkin or Mr. Harkness to come back up so they can give us a little bit of No Place for Hate info as we close up here.
Like, all the people in your performances, they're like real life people, right? That happen like in all your experiences, right?
No, not all. It's like I combine both in the presentation. So there's people that have the real life experiences, and then there's parts even in those stories that are combinations of multiple people. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's just like I'm sitting there and thinking creatively, like, oh, how do I use... But all characters have at least something that was based on someone else. Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely, all characters have something that's based on someone.
What made you want to, like, you know, put it out there? You know, like their experiences to, like, everyone. Yeah,
I think our stories are what makes us feel connected to each other. You know, I think one of the things that I spoke about. You're a freshman?
Yeah,
okay.
I am.
So last year, one of the things, the concept I have is this the Japanese teacup philosophy, where, you know, Japanese teacups have no handle because if it's too hot to hold, it's too hot to drink, right? And I grew up with teacups that have handles, but those handles actually kept me away from understanding the temperature in this cup. And our temperature is what actually connects us, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm always interested in people's stories, because then that's how we build compassion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So lots of great questions here, lots of great insight taken away. So as we kind of close up here and kind of give everyone some more information if they can want to follow up. So Dr. Mykee, can you tell the listeners where they can find out more about you? Are you active on social media, any of that kind of stuff?
Yes. So the Mykee Fowlin is the easiest way, but MykeeFowlin. So my website is MykeeFowlin.com. My Instagram is, the handle's at Mykee Fowlin. Same with Twitter, and my Facebook page is Mykee Fowlin.
And for our No Place for Hate advisors, you talked about a meeting that's going to be on Thursday. But when do you have a time when students meet normally? Like, is there an assigned date? Like, if a freshman or anybody that's listening wants to find out more about No Place for Hate, what would they do?
Sure, absolutely. Tomorrow is our No Place for Hate new member meeting, and it's going to be held in Mr. Harkness's room, which is 409 in the chemistry hallway, and that'll be immediately after school from 2:30 to 3 o'clock. And then we generally try to meet every other Thursday at that same time and same place. But if you just listen to the morning announcements, it's always on ETV when we will be meeting. And of course, if you come to the meeting tomorrow, we can provide you with a written schedule and get you connected on all of our social media and whatnot.
Awesome. So thanks everyone for taking some time here after the performance. I know it takes a lot out of you to perform, so we really appreciate you taking some time out here to kind of further perform, but also give a lot of great insight to the students that are listening. So thanks everybody.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank
Love
you.
it.
Thank you.